Well, greetings to everybody. I have on my channel today, I'm very happy to say, David Kurten, who you will know, most of you will know, because I've been on his show on a number of occasions. So it's now time for him to come on my show, as it were, and exchange some ideas. What I want to talk to David about is basically not what policies we have or we share, but actually, the failure, I think everybody would admit, the total and utter failure now of representative democracy. It's failed. It represents nobody. The governments we have do not represent anybody at all, which is why an awful lot of us simply don't vote. And the press seems to make the mistake that we're not interested in politics. We are. It's just none of the above. And so there's now a failure, and it's a failure in Britain, and it's a failure in North America. It's red or blue, red or blue, red or blue. And they all, to be brutally frank, piss in the same pot. So it doesn't really get us anywhere. And of course, as you know, David Kurten is the head of the Heritage Party, with whom I have quite a lot of agreement when it comes to their policies. And I'm quite sure that if we had a different system, there would be lots of people like David elected with common sense policies. I know he won't mind me saying common sense policies, but frankly, common sense. So the Heritage Party is another one of the smaller parties who actually have in their shop window quite a lot of good stuff, but can't beat the bloody system. So there we are. So David, welcome, dear boy. Welcome to my channel for a change.
Great to join you. Yeah, thanks.
I've got some ideas, but I'm not gonna prejudge everything that we talk about. So give me your views on what you feel that we could do to move away from this system of red or blue in the Anglosphere, one might say.
Yeah, well, in the UK, it's red, blue, yellow, green. They're all the same. They're all part of the Uni-party, and this is set up to offer people the illusion of choice. So you got people are fed up with the fake Conservatives. They vote Labour. I don't know why, because they're obviously the same, just worse. But then some people are moving to Lib Dems, Greens, thinking they're an alternative, but they're all the same. I mean, I'm disappointed because I set the Heritage Party up to be a real alternative. You know, we're not part of the Uni-party. Our policies are based on principles, which I think millions or tens of millions of people would agree with, which is just common sense. But the last election here in July 2024, it was disappointing. You know, we got 41 candidates standing, which for a startup party was very good, considering we have very little money and very little attention from the mainstream media. They're pushing everybody else, but they kind of ignore us. I think that's deliberate. But obviously there's 650 seats in Parliament. So you need a lot of money to be able to put candidates everywhere, £500 deposit. So, you know, you're talking £325,000 just for the deposits to stand candidates everywhere. And it's even worse if you want to stand for some of these regional metro mayors that are being set up that have a lot of power now. You know, the mayor of London, the mayor of Manchester, etc. It's £10,000 to stand in those races, so you need a lot of money. But you know, the results that we got were disappointing because we were squeezed, because the first past the post system is not representative. I mean, I do like the idea of proportional representation, because then at least if you get 1 or 2% of the votes, if it's a really fair proportional system like you have in the Netherlands, then you know you get the number of seats in proportion to the percentage of votes that you get, and at least you get some representation there. We don't have that in the UK because it suits the parties that swap between them, red and blue, fake Conservative, fake Labour, and they each take their turn and they perpetuate the system that keeps them in power. I mean, it is possible to break the system, but it needs 10 to 20 million people acting together at the ballot box to do that. And you know, people are manipulated by propaganda, by very, very powerful psychological techniques to sway them to this or to that. And yeah, a lot of people are just not as engaged as maybe we are and the people watching your channel. You know, they get their politics from the front page of the Sun or something, and if millions of people do, and so they're swayed by propaganda that is very, very shallow and very transient, and that's a big issue. So it is, it's to say the least. I'm trying, I'm soldiering on, but so far results have been disappointing. But we have to keep going because we need to give people an alternative and a chance to change things.
Let me run a few things past you, David, because I watch a lot of your stuff and we agree on so much. I When we had proportional representation, and of course, as you know, I started out UKIP. I was a UKIPper, I was a kipper. I hadn't been involved in politics at all, party politics. I was a city fund manager. It was Brexit. I wanted to see Brexit, and that's what I wanted to do. And that brought me into politics very late in life. I think something in the region of my early 50s or mid 50s or something like that. I'd never been involved in politics before. It doesn't mean to say I wasn't interested in politics. I was, but I had never been involved in politics, and that's a different thing. Now, when it was proportional representation, a guy, and I remember it so so well. We went into a pub. I was campaigning up in Yorkshire, which was my parliamentary seat, European parliamentary seat, Yorkshire, North Lincolnshire, and it was the first time that people have had proportional representation. And a chap said to me in one of the pubs, and he wasn't the only guy or woman who said this, that I'm voting this time because it'll make a difference. I haven't voted for years. It doesn't make any difference who you vote for, but now it does. They have to register your vote. So if I vote UKIP, as it was then, and of course in the 2014 election, UKIP had beat every other party. They beat every other party, which was good. And that was round about the time UKIP was then became a mainstream party and then became politically correct and flushed everything down the lavatory. Everything that was bad about politics, they then embraced, which was a great shame, which is, of course, why I left. But it's not about me. It's about something else. Now, also, so proportional representation then was good. But we do see the problem in France, for example, where proportional representation throws up a clear winner, if you will, let's say in Marine Le Pen, who I know personally, and then the other parties then get together in order to squeeze her out. So where the sort of gerrymandering and the fiddling around that goes on keeps that person that people have quite clearly voted into first place, they get together and keep her in second or third place. And this has gone on. This is the second time this has gone on. So the police, the French go on getting somebody that they don't want in the same way that Starmer is in number 10 Downing Street because we simply couldn't bear the Conservatives any longer. And so we voted the Conservatives out. And we've got a psycho now at number 10. Now, here's what I want to run past you. Excuse me rambling on, but I want to, I value your view. Would it not make more sense to have the system that we have, if we have to have sort of representative democracy? Let's park that just for a minute and say, if you want to stand for Parliament, it would be illegal to align yourself at the election with anybody else. Blue, red, green rosettes would be verboten. You would have to stand on the stump at the church hall or in the town square and say, I'm Godfrey Bloom. I live in the constituency. I've lived in the constituency for several years. I believe in this, this, and this. And my five main planks, if you want to vote for Godfrey Bloom, are this. So people would then say, oh, I agree with an awful lot of that. I'm going to vote for this guy. And I would be sent to Westminster to represent them. Now, of course, we get a situation, and it shows every day, especially when you're watching the House of Commons. Somebody who lived in a red area gets elected, and somebody lives in a blue area who gets elected. And having been in the game for 10 years, in elected office for 10 years, these people are very subpar. These people are really, really poor. They're badly educated, they're stupid, they have psychological problems. In order to get in party politics to the top, you have to be a sociopath. It's an advantage to be a sociopath. You have to have a completely different view of life to the ordinary citizen. So what about a system like that, where you stand in your constituency, no labels, no nothing, it's who you are? Because David, I think, where do you live? Just remind me where you live.
At the moment, I live in Berkshire near Reading.
Right, okay. Well, in that case, you see, it's very likely that you would get elected.
Maybe in the rural area that I live in, yeah.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
we had that system. If we had the system where they weren't allowed to say that they were conservative, they say, just I believe in this. In the same way, I started up here when I was UKIP, and UKIP was nowhere when I joined. It was nowhere. It was tiny, weeny. And I had my campaign. There was me, my mother-in-law, my dog, in 2004 or whatever it was. That was it. I got elected under that system. And when I finished, UKIP in Yorkshire got 400,000 votes. It was way ahead of anybody else here. It can be done. People re-engage. So let's get the if it's representative democracy, let's get somebody who really represents them in. Now, how do you think that could work? Will it work? Give me your views.
There's a lot there that you've just said. I mean,
Yeah, sorry about that.
The main point is for, essentially banning political parties. So you would say that everybody who stands for election has to be an independent. You wouldn't have parties then. You'd disband the Electoral Commission and dissolve all the political parties. And, I don't know if that's the route to go down, to be honest, because I think people they would automatically associate with certain people when they got into Parliament or when they got into the council, and they would form groups and they would form blocks. And they essentially recreate parties, just not in name, if they did that. And you would still see who was represented the different policies that exist at the moment in different areas. But with you did get with proportional representation with UKIP back in the glory days. So did I. I got onto the London Assembly with UKIP under proportional representation. So, but that is pure proportional representation with the d'Hondt system. That's quite technical, but I think that is a good system. So I'm not sure that actually, going down the route of actually banning political parties is the way to go. But it's, we could see it may work, but I'm not sure. But the French system that you mentioned, I think that's different, because that's not using d'Hondt proportional representation. It is actually a two-round voting system, where the first one is first past the post, and then they bump off everybody who gets lower than 12.5%. And then what happened this year is that something happened that no one really envisaged would happen, is that the two opponents to Le Pen got together and withdrew in certain places to let the other one have a leg up. So, but that's not proportional representation. That's almost like an alternative vote system. So that's not the road to go down, and that's clearly can be abused. But the d'Hondt system, I think, does work, and it got you in, it got me in. And if a party can come up, like in the Netherlands, you get parties that get 1 or 2% of the votes, get some representation. So I think that's the way to go, rather than forcing everybody to stand as an independent. The thing with that as well, if you did that, the people with more money would win. So because it's expensive to stand, it's expensive to campaign, and the people who have got more money to spend on publicity and who have got connections in the media and so on, who are in favor of the agendas that are being played out in the country, mass immigration, the climate agenda, the woke agenda, etc. They're going to get more attention from the national media and the local media, so people are going to hear about them more, and that can be played in that way. So, at the moment, you can stand as an independent or you can stand for a political party as well. And independents do very well many times in local elections. So, that's also part of democracy. The local government has power over local areas. So you need to consider that as well as the Westminster elections as well.
A lot of both our viewers probably won't be fully familiar with the D'Hondt system. Could you just run that past us all, so we've got a bit of an understanding of it in the most simplistic way you can?
So essentially, if you look at the Euro elections and the London elections and the Scotland and Wales elections as well, you have some members of the body, the parliamentary body, are elected in first past the post constituencies, and some of them are elected on a London-wide or Scotland-wide or regional list. And it ends up with it being proportional. So you basically remove the ones that get elected on the first past the post system, and you end up is almost with proportionality with the parties based on the proportional part of the election, so the London-wide list or the regional lists that you have. The thing with that is you have some people that are just representing a much larger area rather than a constituency, but it ends up being proportional. So when I was in London, for example, there were 12 Labour, there were 9 Conservative, there were 2 Greens, 2 UKIP, and 1 Liberal Democrat. And that was pretty much in proportion to how people voted in the proportional list for the whole of London.
Well, thank you for that. Tell me, another view that I've always had is that one understands Westminster, the party system Westminster, which we've all grown up with. I'm always at a loss to understand where that political system falls in local government, because what on earth has local government got to do with what Westminster has to deal with? It doesn't make any sense to me. Yes, you're quite right. The more independence, and I think people are beginning to realize. I mean, I once did a podcast before the last big local election for anybody, as long as they're independent. Anybody, even if they got 2 heads, it doesn't matter who they are. The raving Uni-party, anybody. But for goodness sake, don't go down the route of the placemen that we have in local government, where you get some working class towns which are red in permanently, and I live in a leafy East Yorkshire constituency, which of course is always Conservatives. I mean, they actually think they would literally die within 24 hours if they didn't vote Conservative here. And of course, as Nigel Farage once said, he made 1 or 2 very good comments, which I do like to quote. One of them, he said, never underestimate the stupidity of the rural Conservative. I'm not getting into trouble with this because obviously I have a small holding in rural Yorkshire, and I know all these people, and they're my very good friends, and I love them dearly. But politically, they are fundamentally stupid. They really don't get anything. So we are we're stuck with that. But we've got to. How do you envisage? We can't go on like we're going, can we? And we can't go on like we're going. The debt's over 3 trillion and rising. Let's forget America. It's just as bad. And we're no better than America, just as bad. The people we have representing us are ill-educated. They don't understand anything. And the last lot were no better. Incidentally, the last lot were no better. The Conservatives were equally hopeless. And now, of course, we have a cabinet. There is no commercial experience in this current cabinet. Nobody has been in business.
Mm.
So you have this extraordinary thing where they're legislating for business. They're trying to run an economy, which they shouldn't be doing anyway, because there's no point, there's no way of government, as Lord Salisbury said. Uh, Lord Salisbury was a great libertarian. He said, "My job, or the job of Parliament, is to facilitate the entrepreneurial spirit
Mm.
of the British. Step back. Let's make it easy for them to actually start a business. Try starting a business now." You know, the
Yeah.
man from the town hall, there's somebody there with a clipboard before we even thought about it. When I started my own business in 1991, there was a regulator there to inspect my files. I said, "I've only just started. I've only been in business 3 weeks. There aren't any files." So he inspected nothing, ticked a lot of boxes with nothing. And this is the world in which we now live. And of course, the model should be John Cooperthwaite, perhaps in Hong Kong, post-war, who actually said the same thing as Lord Salisbury. My job is to make sure that the sanitation works and the police aren't corrupt. Everything else is down to the people who live in Hong Kong. The most successful economy post-war on the face of the planet. So we can't win. We can't win with the current system. So what do you think? What is the doing thing? Everybody watches this, sort of wrings their hands in despair and says, "What can we actually do? What can we do? Each individual one of us."
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the government should be small. It should be allow people to just get on with their lives without, the minimum amount of interference, with the government supporting the things that we need, like you say, sanitation, roads, maybe some healthcare, obviously, and so on, and defense and police and probation. Those are the things that the government need to organize and supply. But what we have at the moment is huge interference in our everyday lives, in our culture, in the economy and business. And these people we've got now are even worse than the last lot, if that were possible. The last lot were pretty awful. This lot are even worse. I mean, it's not just a case of them not being the brightest bulbs in the pack. I think that they're just not functioning at all in terms of doing anything positive. So look, I mean, we've got this government now essentially because 40% of people didn't vote at all. If those 40% of people had voted for, for me, I obviously would say, because I'm biased being the leader of the Heritage Party, then we wouldn't have this trouble now, but what you had is the fake Conservative vote collapsed from 14 million to 7 million. They only got half the number of votes they got the previous time because their own base, their own core was so disgusted with them. But Labour, they went from 9 million to 9 million. There was no big move to Labour. They didn't inspire anybody. They just got the same number of votes they did before. And only 20% of the electorate voted for them. So 40% voted for other parties and, 40% voted for nobody. So we need to engage. This is the message I continually give. And I know some people are saying the opposite, is there's no point in voting, it doesn't change anything. It does, if everybody does it. I mean, if 9 million people had voted for the Heritage Party, we would be on the road to recovery right now, but we're not. We're on the road to disaster. And as you say, these people are so financially inept. I mean, it's almost as though they're not just inept, they are being deliberately destructive. They are going to crash the economy. The debt is going to spiral out of control. We'll have hyperinflation. They won't be able to pay for any public services. And we're going to end up like a basket case, like Latin America in the 1980s. This is where we're heading with this government we've got at the moment. So unless they fall, and they might do by some miracle, because the thing is with a lot of, they've got a huge majority, but that can in itself cause its own problems because you get groups that become confident to try to play their own hand and demand certain things that the actual government doesn't want. Who knows? They could fall apart and collapse. I hope so. And then we may have a chance to actually get back to normality. But the thing is, the system we've got at the moment is the system we have. So we have to try to win elections with the system we have. And, my message at the moment is, please come and join me in the Heritage Party, stand to be a candidate, vote for us, and let's try to restore our nation in the system we've got. Because I don't have any other answer. You know, people who say, oh, we just need to, the whole system's going to crash and then and something new is going to rise like a phoenix out of the ashes. But what? You know, no one can give me a straight answer. I mean, are you going to go and burn down Parliament? I don't want that. You know, is that the plan? What is the plan? You know, are we going to have people's assemblies, you know, which I don't think are going to, you know, actually do much productive any more than we got now. It can easily be infiltrated as well. I don't know. The trouble is, if you burn down this system and you create a new system, all the people who are around who are destructive are still around. You know, to be honest, they all need to be rounded up and arrested so they can't do any more damage. And but that's quite radical.
We have an interesting phenomenon, do we not? We have this system where we seem to produce, and this is not just Labour, this is also Conservative. We seem to produce people, and we have done, I would say, for probably 30 or 40 years now. I'm 75 in a few weeks' time, so I've seen it all before. I'm an old geezer now. But here's the problem we have. The people who arrive at cabinet rank don't actually like this country. They don't like us. They don't like our institutions. They don't like our system of law. They don't like all the protections that we've had, which have been brought for, one might almost argue, since Edward III, that have developed, which have protected the freedom of the individual. You could go back to Anglo-Saxon times, and quite legitimately, and some historians would take that view, that build the protection to the individual. And of course, all the country is 6 million individuals. You know, that is what it is. And that was what made the country greatest empire, certainly geographically, not longevity, but the world's ever seen. Fantastic. It's been adopted. Our systems, our legal systems have been adopted by other countries very successfully. And it seems that people now who get into position of power and legal at the top of the legal profession, you know, you get sort of attorney generals and you get all sorts of people who are actually at the levers of power who don't actually like what we have and our heritage. They're against us. They don't like us. And hence this clearly government-sponsored mass immigration is to destroy the culture and the background of the country. But I don't even think Nigel Farage gets it, you know. I don't think he actually gets it. He thinks it's just mass incompetence by the Home Office and stupidity and this, that, and the other. People don't seem to understand this is quite deliberate. Do they really think that we could not stop the boats if we wanted to? And if they made Godfrey Bloom Prime Minister or David Kurten Prime Minister, they'd stop in the morning. They'd stop in the morning.
Right.
Because I'd mobilise the Royal Navy and I'd tow the buggers back. Simple, 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 simple. Now, we did it with Philip of Spain. You know, we did it with the Kaiser. We did it with Napoleon. We did it with Hitler. Easy peasy. But we'll throw our hands up in the air and we start talking about the European Court of Human Rights. We talk about all these things and what can we do and what can we put with them and how do we repatriate them, and there's Rwanda and what's wrong with it. Ah, come on. You know, you tow them back. The Royal Navy tows them back to where they came from, which is France or Belgium. And if the French don't like it, I'm sorry, they'll have to lump it. And if we have to sink some French boats, it won't be the first time.
Well, I think if we did tow them back to France, France will soon start towing them back or sending them back in lorries to Italy, and then Italy would start sending them back to Tunisia or Libya or wherever. It would sort of just, you know, it would be a domino effect. But, you know, you're absolutely right. We could end this tomorrow if we wanted, if the will was there. But you've got government now and before previously were actively facilitating migrants to come over in the tens of thousands, because they're sending British boats, whether they're Royal Navy boats or Border Force boats, to go and meet these dinghies in the middle of the channel, load them up and bring them back to Dover and send them to hotels. So it's obvious that the government is part of the plan that's happening. And as long as we got fake Conservative and fake Labour, it's not going to change. But, you're right, about Farage and others. I thought the world of him back in the glory days of UKIP 2013 to 2016. But now it's different. I think he's behind the curve on most things. And there is this a paradigm, if you like, that you mentioned that, oh, this is all just incompetence. When clearly it's not. This is a 100-year or more plan, whether it's, the communism from Marx's Communist Manifesto in 1848, where there's a deliberate manifesto to set out what you need to do to destroy the family, destroy the nation state, destroy private property, and destroy Christianity. Those are the four things that Marx espouses. And then you've got the Frankfurt School with cultural Marxism and critical theory being developed, the long march through the institutions, cultural Marxist activists getting into universities to undermine our principles and our values and culture there, and then getting into the media, getting into political parties to infiltrate and take them over. You've got the Fabian Society, created the last part of the 19th century, and you've got them now boasting they've got 147 members of parliament now in the new parliament, mostly in the Labour Party, but a couple in the fake Conservatives as well. And obviously they are allegiant not to the people of this country, not to the culture and heritage of this country, but to their group, their Fabian group, which wants to impose communism slowly, rather than with a quick revolution. But the end result and the end goal is the same. And to do that, they need to undermine everything good about this country and normal about this country, which is an inheritance from our forefathers. So this is absolutely deliberate, whether it's the program of mass immigration, whether it's the climate alarm and net zero program, which is going to dismantle our energy infrastructure and our economy, whether it's the LGBT agenda, which is normalizing all kinds of perversion and militating against normal, natural marriage between a man and a woman, whether it's the abortion agenda, where we have now 250,000 children a year are killed in their mother's womb. 1 in 3 pregnancies in the UK now ends in a baby being killed before it's born. And people then complain about the birth rate being below fertility and replacement rate. Well, that's why, and many, many other agendas as well. The war agenda, where we're sending billions of pounds a year to Ukraine to stoke up a war with Russia, which is completely unnecessary, that didn't need to even happen, but was prolonged shamefully by Boris Johnson and other people in this country who've been Prime Minister, now Starmer as well, and obviously getting involved in the conflict in the Middle East to prolong that as well, which could be disastrous. All of these things are just disastrous for the country, and it's being done deliberately. It's very clear. This is more than just incompetence or cock up. This is a deliberate collapse, and we're now into the acceleration part of the final stage of this, and if we don't turn around the boat very, very quickly by 180 degrees, we're going to end up with an economic collapse in the next period of time, short period of time, I think.
And I think coming with that will be gated communities, for example. I mean, I used to always spend a fortnight in Cape Town years ago, to get a bit of sunshine when I was in the city. Just get out there in January and get some sunshine and scoot back. Of course, in gated communities, and you find gated communities in California, and it's a thing. I don't see any way around the fact that now, in some of our big cities, that the middle class, as it were, are going to have to actually start living in gated communities. And I don't know whether you saw the clips of Ireland, where the illegal immigrants, or they've been brought in again, it's the same. They're rampaging around in broad daylight, that we are getting now to an almost a dark age where, I mean, I live in a very rural community with a small holding, and I can assure you that I have taken all sorts of steps to make sure that I am not a victim. I'm not going to go into them on screen, but I can tell you, I'm an ex-soldier, and believe me, don't try it with me, sunshine.
Okay.
It won't work. But I mean, what you do if you're living in a city and all the rest of it is really, really quite frightening. And it has to go that way, doesn't it? It has to go that way. If you look at, there are parts of France, French cities that are no-go. There are parts of London that are no-go. I was in a cab the other day, and the cabbie was telling me, he said, oh, well, I can't remember which bit of North London it was. He said, we just don't go there. We just don't go there. And of course, I'll finish on this. I'll ask you one final question, David. One of the great protections that we had, David, was a free press. We had a free press. We don't have a free press now. Only a very small number of corporations own everything you read. Everything you watch on mainstream television is owned by a very small number of international corporations. And that Boris Johnson, who scuppered the peace plan in May 2022 between the Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and now at the cost of probably another 300,000 lives, is now the editor of the Daily Telegraph newspapers. How can this be? The man is a psychopath, and he sleeps at night. He doesn't care. There was a peace plan. It was on the table. Yeah. And he's now in charge editorial of what I think you would probably agree in the last 40 or 50 years, the leading newspaper of this land, the Daily Telegraph. And it's been handed over to an editorial policy which is just simply pro-war.
Yeah, I always used to like reading the Telegraph, even back in the days before there was social media, when you could read things online. You know, you had to actually buy a physical paper, and it was always more intelligent, and you gave very insightful, you know, opinions and considered views on things. But, you know, now to have this creature of the cabal in charge of one of our former glorious papers, it just shows that where everything is going. So there's a group of people who are infiltrating everything, taking over everything, using everything that has been created by good, decent people in order to advance the nefarious agendas of this group of people. And you're going to see this in the Telegraph now, not to mention Ofcom, which is I think it's a creation of Tony Blair, but is obviously still existing today and has been given more and more powers in order to try to censor opinions which go against the narratives of the day, whether it's about lockdowns or injections or Ukraine or Gaza, Israel, you know, or anything else coming on. If you have the wrong opinion, you get censored because you're smeared as promoting misinformation or disinformation. They're bringing back these old Leninist, communist words and applying them today 100 years later. It's very, very interesting that you've got the same words the Bolsheviks used now being used today as weapons against free speech. So I salute people who come out of the system. You know, you can't be a television broadcaster outside the remit of Ofcom, but you can, you know, create things on the internet that are based abroad or in, you know, in other places, you know, which are not yet under the thumb of Ofcom, in order to try to speak truth and to look into things from an alternative view. I mean, you know, what is good is Elon Musk taking over Twitter and turning it into X. You know, I never thought Elon Musk would be someone who's going to do so much good in terms of freedom. But, you know, if we didn't have that, imagine where we would be now. I mean, that is a huge win for free speech and for people having the biggest social media platform in the world now, X, where you can still say what you like. and share any opinion that you want. So, you know, they haven't won completely, and we need to keep fighting on that front.
Oh, no, what a pleasure to talk to you in some ways, and otherwise it's deeply depressing. My wife sometimes tells me that whenever we finish a dinner party, everybody wants to call off and shoot themselves because I try not to be like that, but it's very difficult not to be, isn't it?
Uh,
But David, thank you so much for coming on. Very interesting, and everybody watching, you can follow. There'll be a link down here. There's a link to David Kurten's material, and you can get to him and the Heritage Party, which I'm a big lover of. And I must get down to speak one day. It's always the wrong time or the wrong place, David. But
next time.
yeah, next time, definitely, and I'll really
Definitely.
enjoy it, and that'll be marvelous. So, thanks again for your time. Thanks again, David, and again, a monster good luck to you and your party. I think you're doing an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you. Really great to join you.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.